Welcome to Grassroots Iowa, conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics. I'm your host, Pastor Jeremy Higgins, and we're coming to you from our studio here in our radio room at Calvary Community Church in Cedar Rapids. And today we have a special guest. Mary Lindstrom is with us. She is a dynamic leader who is really working to shape the future of the Republican Party in this state. Mary's the chairperson of the Iowa Young Republicans, and she has been since 2023. And you previously served as the chairperson of the Iowa Federation of College Republicans. That's pretty exciting. And no doubt Mary's passionate about empowering the next generation of conservatives to find their voice and to stand strong in their values. Mary, I'm so blessed to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you. Thank you for carving out some time. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So I like to start these programs with the same question, to try to, get to the heart of the matter. And, for us, the heart is Jesus Christ. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey. When did you come to the Lord? What role does faith play in your everyday life? And we'll kind of build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a Christian my entire life. My mom and dad raised us in the church. Didn't make it to many church services on Sundays. We were a busy family, but really made time for God and found my faith in college.
Nice.
I'm a University of Iowa grad. They have a wonderful salt company out there.
They
and
do.
So got involved and kind of struggled to, they really face your sin head on. And that was a struggle for me. That wasn't something that came easily, as it doesn't for many people.
Yeah.
But had some real struggles my senior year with senioritis and just a semester of just bad thing after bad thing with just, lost my grandma, went through a breakup. You're trying to graduate. You're just trying to survive. And so kind of really found Jesus during my last semester of college and said, I want to give my life to Christ. I'm done living in sin. I'm done interpreting the Bible how I want to live my life.
Boy, that's a big point. Yeah, I love hearing that.
Yeah. And it's tough to do, and we all take up our cross daily. It's hard to face it, but yeah, it's really been a big part of my life since. And my now husband, Jack, who I met after graduating, faith is a big part of our life. We're at Veritas Church in Tiffin every Sunday, worshiping and getting into the Word. So it's awesome.
I love that. So, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your political journey, because I think, and I know everybody kind of has this idea that these things should be completely separate. And so many people are like, listen, we can sit down and talk, just don't talk faith and politics. And I'm thinking, those are the only two subjects I really like to talk about. Well, I guess other than firearms. So I'm maybe three. But, I love, and I've, done some research, and I've been blessed to know you for a few years now. I love your story. You're very passionate in your faith, and that stands out when people know you. They know that about you. But also where you stand politically. And let's face it, you're in a generation where for a long time it was, counterculture to be a person of faith.
Yeah.
And that seems to be changing now. We seem to be coming into, or at least shifting towards a more conservative outlook for a lot of the younger folks on college campuses, and I think just younger in general. But maybe tell us a little bit about that journey. What does it look like? How did you, go from a college student to where you're at now in kind of that political realm, Young Republicans, and what did that journey look like?
It's weird that I like kind of looking at the timeline. I actually came out more in politics and then kind of next came out more in faith.
Okay.
Both happened in Iowa City, which I know some University of Iowa liberals
that might be a miracle.
Yes. But when you're put on in the hot seat there and, people are confronting you about your views, you shouldn't, spread Christianity. You shouldn't spread that you're Republican. That's all bad. Well, it really, it made me fight for what I believed in. Yes. And so it all started, COVID had hit when I was a freshman, second semester. They were making us wear masks outside, inside, everywhere.
Right.
You can't eat in the cafeteria. It was awful. And so...
Boy, I'm glad we're past that season, but I'll be honest, I'm also pretty thankful for it because a lot of people did wake up during that time.
Yeah.
So you couldn't eat publicly.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything. And that brought me into politics, there was a posting that college Republicans were going to have a Zoom meeting. And so got in and got involved. And next semester, Mike Pence comes to campus. And so got to meet him, which was like the craziest thing, just getting to be in Iowa politics. And like you go head first into it. You're meeting the vice president, the presidential hopefuls. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I come from Arizona and, I lived there most of my life. I've been in Iowa for 17 years. And I've always been passionate about Jesus and pretty passionate about my politics. It wasn't until I moved to this state that I was really able to start to meet people that were, integral to the
decision makers,
working of the state and federal government. I think a lot of Iowans take for granted and don't even really, push for access to some of these people that are very accessible, especially during those political seasons. And so, that's really exciting. So you got to meet some pretty cool political figures. And were you raised in a political home?
Oh, yeah. My parents are very Republican. They aren't super vocal about it, but when we get family together for holidays, discussions come out. It's a fun time, and mostly raised in a Republican environment, raised around firearms. God bless my grandpa for teaching us young about firearm safety and everything. But so it was definitely implanted in me, but I never realized it was so controversial until I got to Iowa City. I kind of learned it was controversial in high school. I was a little bit, but in high school you don't. I guess now maybe they talk about it more, but when I was in high school, it didn't matter so much. So but it pushed me to come out and find my strength to be in Iowa City again, just in the hot seat where people are pushing you and saying you're wrong and saying all these words I won't say on the radio. It's just it's awful, but it made me a better person. And I still find today in young Republicans and looking at college Republicans that the strongest chapters are in those blue pockets in Iowa where you're forced to fight for your beliefs. You can't sit still and watch everything go by.
Well, that's encouraging because sometimes in a situation like that, people tend to retreat within themselves and they'll be passionate about their faith and they'll be passionate about their politics, but only in certain environments. And so I do love hearing that, in the face of adversity, some of that really does start to come out. And I actually think that that's true on a larger scale, especially within the ranks of Christianity. If you look at some of the more difficult places on the planet to be a Christian, you really do see that that's where some of the greatest pockets of revival are taking place throughout the Middle East, into China and even Russia of late. It used to be that you couldn't speak of your faith in Russia, and then that changed. And for a season, there was a lot of. I have a friend, George Bryson, who planted over 50 churches throughout Russia, but now they've gone completely back the other direction. And you start talking about your faith, and you might get thrown in the gulag. So, you do see though people rising to the occasion, and I do love hearing that young people. When they're facing that kind of adversity on college campuses are doing just that, rising to the occasion. And yet you do hear the occasional other side of that story, families that, send their kid off to school and, he or she comes back, after the first semester and they've already been, bitten by the, campus bug. And all of a sudden, they don't want to hear about faith and they don't want to hear about your politics. And, that those are sad stories. But again, I think that we're seeing a shift back in the other direction. COVID played a part of that. All of the poor politics that came after COVID. You can look at the Biden era politics, and boy, I mean, there were a lot of anti-Christian policies that were coming out of the administration there, and I think a lot of people just said, wait a second, this is a country based on religious freedoms, and oh, by the way, based on a lot of biblical principles, and shouldn't we be able to, as Christians, stand up and speak our mind and be proud of that? Do you mind me asking, what was your degree in college? What were you studying?
Exercise science.
Exercise science. So that's an easy transition to
politics. Politics. God works in mysterious ways. I wanted to be a physical therapist, and COVID hit. I lost all motivation and found politics and was like, this is pretty fun. I'll keep my degree. Politics as a hobby. And now I've really dug into it. I still know a little bit, but not much.
That's fun, and actually that's something that is no doubt helpful throughout life. So, my background is such that, you do a lot of things in life, you have a lot of experiences, certain, education degrees, and, it all adds up to who you are.
Yeah.
But, not, I think, any of them individually define us. So prior to the Young Republicans, you were the chairperson for the Iowa Federation of College Republicans. What differences do you see between engaging college students versus maybe that broader group? What is it, 18 to 40 with the Young Republicans? So what differences do you see?
Yeah. In college, it's really about catching the students where they're at, meeting them where they're at, getting them out to an event. It's a little bit harder to get the activism piece going, but you can engage people really easily. Come grab a slice of pizza at the airliner downtown and get to meet with Senator Joni Ernst. We're going to have her in town or something. When you get into young Republicans, that's when we're kicking into high gear. We do activism and we still have fun, but it's taking students from college, and it's almost like the clickbait. Like I love Turning Point's fun signs that they have that are just like colorful and they grab your attention. But once you have that catch, you have to convince people to get out and door knock and phone bank. And so that's kind of been the difference is training people to be activists. And I mean, groups like AFP have done a wonderful job employing young Republicans and teaching them how to be out on the doors, how to have engaging conversations with people who may not agree with you when you meet them, But there's a little bit of a difference, but the good news is that all young people want to get involved from what I can see.
Nice.
And maybe it's in a more casual format than a county GOP meeting that you encounter. Maybe we're sitting around a campfire roasting s'mores, and that's how we proceed with business.
That sounds like fun.
But yeah, it's definitely a fun environment with the younger age group, and it's exciting to watch people grow from, starting at the 18-year-old mark and growing up to 40 and just seeing them develop, seeing them run for office and just become a better activist.
That's cool. So you've seen young people, men and women alike, go through that process, just kind of start to engage, and then, all of a sudden they're knocking on doors and then maybe signing up to be on a ballot somewhere. Yeah.
A good example is my predecessor, Brett Barker.
Okay.
He's currently a representative. He's from Nevada, Iowa. And he helped recharter the Iowa Young Republicans about, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago. And he went from bringing the group back, getting engaged with the Young Republican National Federation. He then graduated to being the Midwest Regional Vice Chair of the Young Republican National Federation. They helped him organize and run for office, helped get his name and word out there, and now he's a state representative. So
that's cool.
It's cool watching people grow, and we definitely have people who stumble and they lose a primary. We have that happen with plenty of people, but it's cool watching them go through the process. And even if they don't run for office, it's cool saying, hey, I watched you start in Young Republicans and now you're working for AFP as a canvasser. Really awesome to see.
Yeah. And I think people have to remember, we're all part of the same mechanism, and it's not always necessary to rise to the top in that.
Yeah.
And I know it's great to have aspirations and to want to do that, but it's also important to remember that in order for somebody to be successful, whether it's in the political realm or within the function of a healthy local church or, you name it. I mean, a local shoe store, there is that person at the top, but there's all of those, people in the various functions underneath that are really aiding in that success. And, if we could, convince more people to be a part of that process, not just see, I'm going to set my eyes on that, that seat up top. That's where you really do find success. I actually think the church could learn how to do that better. If I'm being honest, it's not my gift set, teaching people that activism side where you bring people together and, teach them to engage on the doorstep.
Yeah.
But, there are organizations that we tend to partner with and work with to help us with that. But it is, I think, something that we all have to learn. You mentioned also being willing to talk to people that maybe think differently than you do. And to be able to do that cordially, I think that's a big part of being a conservative today, is understanding that what we really believe in and stand for is people's right to think differently.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, maybe on the other side of that equation, we're not getting the same kind of respect in that regard.
Well, Bill Maher just had Vice President Vance on, and I think he said something along the lines of, I can get people from the Republican Party to come out and talk to me, but why can't I get people from my own party to come out and sit down with me? What's going on with that?
Isn't that interesting?
It is. And it's also interesting that I find with a lot of Republicans, because we have disagreements within the group, whether, it's political or who we want to win the primary or whatever. Right. We just have very, very contentious Republican governors primary.
Yeah.
But it's just people are so much more willing in the Republican Party to shake hands and say, agree to disagree. I'm going to go home and see what happens, But yeah, that's not something you commonly find on the left. And it's really unfortunate because again, Republicans are willing to have those conversations for the most part. And I wish the left would do the same.
I agree. And it's just one of those things that, hopefully we'll age into. You'll see more of that. For the record, I have invited Rob Sand to come and sit down with me on the program. I hope he takes me up on it. I'd love to have a cordial conversation with him about his, proposed policies and the way he views the way this state should be run. Hopefully Zach Lane will be sitting down in the next couple of weeks. And, it's an interesting season for us as a state. We have had a real conservative run state for a lot of years now. And, I could see, people on the other side of that wanting something different. But, it's not about wanting something different or the same. What we want is what's best for the state and for the people, for our faith, the ability to worship the way that we want to worship. And I think that, we do start to run into some obstacles when we're having some of those conversations with folks. But let me ask you this. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are that are facing young conservatives in Iowa today? Whether that's on college campuses or in the workforce, you're pretty close to the heartbeat of it all. What do you think?
When the caucuses were going on, I got asked this question a lot, and I feel like when I went back to our membership and asked, what's the cause that you're, really strongly opinionated about? Pro-life is a big argument. We're young people, we're starting families, and a lot of people are interested in the pro-life argument. The border is a really big deal, and back when the caucuses happened, it was a question of whether we were going to flip from Kamala, I guess, or Biden, whoever was supposedly at the top, to Trump, or if we'd have another 4 crazy years.
Right.
So that was a big issue for young people, and fentanyl coming over, killing young people.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
So I'd say the border, immigration, being reined in, the pro-life argument, young people love to go out and shoot. It's just like a passion. And so pro-Second Amendment. But yeah, it's...
My wife and I are actually getting ready to open a firearms store here in the community. We'll talk about that in the future. But, I wish there were more people that would take advantage of their Second Amendment rights. So I do love hearing that.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things our members are passionate about. I'd say those are some of the most common ones. But yeah, it's interesting to get into those conversations with folks, talking about political conversations and the intersection with faith and, what topics are most passionate. And logically, we have a lot of members who are Christian. We have a lot of members who are the pro-life argument intersects a lot with faith.
Sure, 100%.
So that's one that comes up a lot, definitely.
And it's an interesting part of the conversation because, like you said, it obviously the pro-life movement falls on the Republican side of the equation, and it's considered to be a political separation point for the two parties. I don't really look at it as a political issue, and it's one of those things, again, you go back to the whole separation of church and state and everybody misunderstands. And, we can get into that and talk about the letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Church and how that's been, taken out of context for years now and the mistake at the Supreme Court level. But, that's another conversation. Ultimately, what Thomas Jefferson was saying when he wrote that letter to the church was that he was working to keep the state out of the church, not the church out of the state. But even if that wasn't the case, how could an issue like a child's right to survive his or her mother's womb be a political issue? Psalm 127:3 it says, "Lo, children are the heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward." This isn't politics. This is purely based in faith. And when you believe that there is a creator, that he created us in his image, and that he gifted us with it's miraculous when a man and a woman come together in marriage and they make a child, even if it's outside of the bond of marriage. That is such a beautiful thing. And for people to look at that, it's funny, in this state you can be put in jail for breaking a bald eagle's egg, but throwing away a baby, that's not the same issue. Although praise the Lord, sounds like the Planned Parenthood in Iowa City was recently closed down. That's amazing.
That's wonderful news.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Just backing up a little bit, I talked about how the timeline of politics coming up came before faith.
Yeah.
I used to lean more pro-choice.
Sure.
And I got a lot of slack for it as a Republican. And again, with those conversations, that we as Republicans allow where you can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
I had people who continuously pursued me and said, I want to talk to you about why you think that there are some instances when an abortion is okay.
Sure.
And I had people I was part of Young Americans for Freedom, and I had a couple friends, Hunter Morrow and Garrison Allen, and they kept pursuing me on it. And finally, I just came to the realization through church and through talking to them that how have I been so blinded all these years to fall into the trap of, women are victims and, a baby's an inconvenience. And I finally came to realize that babies are such a beautiful joy. And I also had someone from Young Republicans, this was a great example. They said, when you look at a sonogram, do you see a difference between any sonogram because someone was raped, because the baby was made out of wedlock, because of a one-night stand? You don't. It's a beautiful gift, and all we know about how a baby develops now and, the size and each week of development, it's just, how can you not see that as a beautiful gift from God? It's incredible. And I have people very close to me who are very pro-choice, very pro-abortion, and I pray for them continuously, but yeah, it's just crazy to me. And I thank God that he brought me to see the light on that issue. I'm so glad. But it's so sad to me that people can't see that beautiful gift.
Yeah. There's a family in our church, the Owens, Rachel Owen runs the Informed Choices Medical Clinics. So there's that one down there in Iowa City, and there's a number of them around the state. But she was on a few weeks back, and I love talking to her and just people like her about the work that they're doing in this particular arena, because it is such an important work, and I do love hearing and I'm curious as to your perspective on this. She was saying that they're seeing a lot more young people coming to that conclusion that you just shared. You came to, and I'm thankful that your friends, they were able to pursue those conversations without, forgive me, but without being jerks about it.
Yeah.
I think that, we have to learn to speak truth, but to do it in love. In the book of Ephesians, we're told exactly that. Speak truth, speak it in love. And when it's something like this that we're so passionate about, sometimes people in their speaking of truth aren't doing it the way that somebody is going to be able to receive that truth. Yeah. And so that's an important thing. Do you think that that's a big part of why so many young people are starting to come to this conclusion?
Yeah, I would agree. I also think a lot of people just, it's kind of like after Charlie Kirk died, a lot of people found their faith.
Right. Praise the Lord.
Yeah. And as it's a terrible thing, but in the God works in mysterious ways and God has a purpose for everything, so many people found their faith because of him.
Yeah.
Or spoke. I got baptized after he died. I said, I want to do this. I'm not going to hold off anymore. And so I got baptized in November of last year. But
cool.
I think people are realizing that being pro-life is common sense. We have so many ways to engage with the pro-life movement. The Susan B. Anthony group, I've got a young Republican who's working for them. We just had the, March for Life at the Capitol and Zach Lane was there.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be pro-life. It's cool, and people want to protect babies, and young people are speaking out for them. Again, people starting families, it's kind of common sense that they'd want to defend that. But it's awesome to see. with social media, because people speak out more for the pro-life movement, you also see it on the left of people speaking out for the
Sure, of
pro-choice
course.
movement. We got a Republican president, and in Iowa, we've got an entirely Republican federal delegation. But it's so insane to see the contrast on the left, which I think helps the right's argument. I will never forget seeing a video of an influencer a couple months back. She had neon hair, crazy clothes on, and
The whole bit, yeah.
yeah, and she said, I had an abortion because it wasn't convenient for me and my husband at that time.
Wow.
What
Convenience.
do you and now they do have a baby, and I can't remember, boy, girl, or whatever it identifies as, but
Right.
I don't know how you'd approach that child someday and say, we had a kid before you, it just wasn't the right timing, so we said, we're done.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. And I have a friend who's a product of someone telling her mom to not get an abortion. I mean, those are important conversations to have. And again, the insanity I talked about in Iowa City, I think the more you see it on the left, the right rises up and people see the common sense and come out of the woodwork, and it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I think sometimes the left can take their aversion to something so far that it helps people that might be in the fray to go, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. That seems a little chaotic or psychotic.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of that is helping to wake up young and old alike. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. Faith and family, clearly, a central part of Iowa's identity. How does the Iowa Young Republicans approach integrating, Judeo-Christian values into its work and its messaging? Like, is that out there in the front of who you guys are, or where is that found?
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of our messaging doesn't come from a religious backing, and we've talked about starting like a Bible group or a prayer group, and if we had the bandwidth in a small state like Iowa, I would love to do it. But we do start meetings with prayer, as most GOP events do start with. But we have folks who pray for each other, I know, and we get people who go to church together. I go to church with our national committee woman every Sunday and get her involved. But I wish we did more. It's just the bandwidth piece. And the Young Republican National Federation, we have 3 meetings a year, and every Saturday we start off with a prayer meeting, and we do worship and hear a message, which is great. But yeah, I wish we did more.
Well, and I can appreciate that it's not a central focus of the organization, but I do love hearing that it is a part of who you guys are and how you gather. And like you already stated, there's probably a fairly large amount of the young Republicans that are men and women of faith, just because conservative values tend to line up with faith-based values. Let's look at a larger scale, like, federal issues, and we've touched on some of them a little bit, like border issues, for instance. Where do you think these things are falling on, people's radar right now? I mean, we're coming into, only a few months out from choosing the next governor of Iowa, and it's been interesting. There's been some conversation alluded to on the other side about, illegal aliens in the state of Iowa, and maybe turning a blind eye to that kind of thing. Where do you think that falls on the radar for young Republicans, young conservatives alike?
Just the immigration issue?
Yeah, immigration, border security, the whole bit.
I think it's a simple answer that young Republicans are all for border security. It's interesting looking at the faith perspective. You see a lot of messaging from the left right now about you're not very Christian if you're not welcoming everyone. And Jesus was an immigrant, and you're very closed-minded. Rob Sand's doing a great job convincing people he's someone he's not.
I would agree.
I don't see any young Republicans going into his camp and voting for him, but he is doing a great job convincing the moderates and the independents that he's somebody he's not. And that's something that's concerning to watch. I do worry about us sitting back a little too much and just saying, oh, we're a red state, we're going to keep being a red state. I think we may see a shift in November, and I pray that that's not what's going to happen, but it's all in God's hands, so we don't have to worry too much. But I think immigration's a big issue. The big problem for young Republicans that comes up is when someone who is here illegally takes the life of someone who is innocently driving, who's innocently out on the road taking a run. Molly Tibbet, a couple years ago, her life was taken. She was just simply out on a run.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, I'd say it's a big focus of our group. But yeah, it's a tough issue.
How can churches and maybe even just faith organizations, faith communities better partner with an organization like the Young Republicans? Because I think we have a common bond, strengthen our state's moral and civic foundation. That's ultimately, the goal of, the Republican Party. We want a strong moral base.
Yeah.
And, the church, I wouldn't necessarily title it as morality as much as, a strong faith base,
Right.
But they're not necessarily interchangeable, but closely linked.
Yeah.
How can we better partner with what you guys are doing?
Yeah. So I've got a hot take here for you.
All right.
So my church out in Tiffin,
Yeah.
we don't talk politics.
Yeah.
Politics doesn't come to the Sunday service. It gets brought up in a general sense. Like after Charlie Kirk died, there was a mention that, it's been a tough week for a lot of people, and, we prayed about it, but we don't talk politics at church. And it's the common sense that we all have that you don't need a Republican president to know that being pro-life is the right answer. That's what the Bible says, So how can churches partner with us? I'm not sure. I think a better question is how Young Republicans can get people into church. I think a lot of people see their party as their religion.
Sure.
And I think,
isn't that interesting?
I think the reverse needs to be more true. That are you seeing your opinions as something that comes from someone like Trump or from Vance or whoever it is that
Sure.
you like to watch on, X? Or are you getting your opinions from the Bible, and then that's reflected when you go to vote in November,
Right.
So I actually worry more about getting people to church from our group. I think people forget that Sunday's a very important day, that you should be going to a church,
Amen.
whatever religion or denomination you're part of. But I wish we did a better job of plugging people in. Everyone can do their part, taking a partner to church on Sunday. But
invite somebody to, hey, come to church with me.
Yeah.
We've got this great lunch afterwards planned. You throw in a free lunch, people almost go with you anywhere.
Exactly. But it's also a great place to pray for our elected officials.
Amen.
I know, Ashley needs prayers, Zach needs prayers, Miller Meeks needs prayers, Feenstra needs prayers. They need our prayers for protection, for peace of mind, to keep doing what they're doing out in D.C., for protection over their families. And I would love to have a better footprint, or I guess blueprint in place for getting Young Republicans to church.
How to do that. Yeah, that's interesting. At Calvary here, I'd say we do talk politics within the ranks of the church. More to the point, we don't shy away from biblical issues that people deem political, gender ideologies, right to life, homosexuality. All of these things are biblical issues. They're not political issues, but they do transfer into political conversations, or conversations that seem to lean towards a political party. Within that, we're not trying to convince people to vote one way or another. We've never said, hey, this person's running for office, you guys should go out and vote for them.
Right.
Not because we're afraid to lose our nonprofit status or whatever, but because I don't want a bunch of people out there mimicking my vote.
Yeah.
I would like to see people learn the principles of faith, and, like you said, then look at the world through that lens of faith, and that will help you to curate your politics. We do teach, especially in election cycles, the principles of voting your faith, what it looks like to be a Christian, and the kinds of things that should matter to us as Christians. We challenge people to, dig into, do their homework, look at both sides of the aisle, what better reflects your morality? Which one of these groups is going to help create a state that's good for your children and your grandchildren to grow up in? But at the end of the day, people need to make the decision that's right for them, if they vote at all. Now, it does bug me when people don't vote as a person.
Yes.
Because that's our right, and there are
it's a freedom we have.
It is. I mean, there are so many people on this planet that do not get to. They even have a feigned freedom. Oh, the polls are open and there's guys with guns standing there, and they're watching who you're voting for. And, so there's there's a sense of freedom that we have as a nation that so many people don't take advantage of. And I think trying to get people more involved in those arenas is something that I wish more churches would do. But I do understand why a lot of churches don't. It's really hard to get people to connect. Like you said, just even in a Republican Party meeting, you're going to have people disagreeing. So within the church, there's going to be those disagreements as well. But at the end of the day, the church does need to rise to the occasion. When you go back to the founding of this country and then you kind of track that forward, the story of the Black Robe Regiment?
No.
You got to dig into that. There were pastors in this country early on that would, they became known as the Black Robe Regiment. They would challenge their congregations. Hey, there's a war going on, and we have this many young men, and they would teach on the necessities of defending your nation, and they would sign people up. They would host political meetings and even moderate between the parties and ask the questions. And there was a time in this country where political rallies were held in the churches, and the pastors were the ones doing the moderating. And there's a pastor out in California, Jack Hibbs, Chino Valley, California, who actually goes back to that, pro-life conversation. He has a radical story where his father wanted him aborted and his mom refused, and he survived against his dad's wishes, and now has, I don't know if you know who Jack Hibbs is. He's got a massive church. He's got a huge movement behind him, and he just teaches the Bible. But he'll come out on stage once in a while, and he was able to find an actual black robe from one of these early churches that actually David Barden helped him acquire, and it's this amazing artifact. And he'll wear that thing out on stage once in a while and talk politics.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful picture of a healthy modern church. And I really do wish there were more pastors that had that heart. We're actually working with a group here locally to try to start a new Black Robe Regiment and to see that revitalized to some degree. I actually last year tried to start a pack of my own, a Pastors Action Committee instead of a political action committee, and had a hard time getting pastors on board with the idea, But again, I get it. I have the freedom here at Calvary where, I'm not afraid that I'll get fired if, I do something that maybe the church board or the voting members of the church, I'm accountable. We have a church board. We have, a congregation that when we have meetings, when we're buying things, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stand before God and give an account of how I've lived my life and pastored this church. And I have an amazing group of men that I serve alongside of that are willing to go into the fray with me, and I think that that's a pretty important place to be. So, gosh, there's so many things that I want to unpack, and I'm trying to be mindful of our time here together. We've only got less than 10 minutes. Time goes by so fast when you're in this space. Yeah. What upcoming initiatives or maybe events does the Young Republicans have that, you want to keep momentum going through the rest of the year into that next election cycle? Like, what do you guys have going on? What can you share with us that we can...
Yeah. So we have two big events coming up, and one just got released by the Young Republican National Federation. So first one, August 1st, we have our Hoover Dinner. It's our annual dinner that we do just to bring people together from across the state and celebrate Young Republicans, getting young people involved. We haven't announced our guest speaker yet. That'll come out soon. But we'd love for people to come out. You can get tickets at iowaYR.com. And then the second thing, and I'm a little bit more excited about this, whether that's appropriate or not, is the Young Republican National Federation just announced they're going to be deploying to Iowa on September 26th for Congresswoman Miller Meeks. Hopeful Senator Ashley Hinson, I think it's going to happen. And then Zach Lane as well. So
nice.
They worked with the White House on what races to prioritize. So it is a little nerve-wracking that they're coming here, but it's also very exciting.
Wow.
Miller Meeks is a tiny but mighty champion for the Young Republicans. And so we're excited. I think it's going to be based out of Davenport, but
So how many people you're talking about? It sounds like a pretty significant movement.
so they hope to fly out 80 people.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. So they pay your way. They pay for flights. They pay for lodging. They pay for meals over the weekend, and so hoping to get some people out. Hoping to fly in 80 people, and then I hope we match that. That would be really great. So yeah, it's exciting. And this is the time of year when all the states help each other. We'll be deploying to Ohio. We'll be deploying to Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan. They have a lot of deployments lined up, and it's really cool because this is the time of the year where you get to see all the inner workings of the Young Republicans and the connections that we all have with, hey, my friend's out in California. She just texted me, Ariana, and she's like, hey, I hope to be in Davenport that weekend, door knocking for you guys.
Cool.
So it's really cool to see, and I'm excited for it.
That is really cool. How many young Republicans are there in the ranks, like in Iowa?
In Iowa, we probably have, I'd say, around 200 to 250.
Okay.
We do allow associate members, so it's kind of like Republican women, and they allow men. We allow people outside the 18 to 40 range because we have high schoolers who want to be involved that aren't quite 18, and we have people who are older who just want to support the mission.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we've got a solid group here, and I'm proud with our Iowa base and how young our group is, that we've got that many folks out, and it's good to see us grow year after year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is exciting to see young people who are excited about first their faith, and then protecting that freedom of faith through getting behind a party that supports the belief system that they have. And I'll tell you, we need more of that. We're like you alluded to earlier, we're hanging in the balances here this election cycle. And, there are a lot of folks that are, worried about which direction that we're going in. And, like you, I've had some of those worries myself. But like you, I also know it's all in God's hands. And at the end of the day, again, look around the world, and when you see societies that are persecuting people of faith, you often see the faith of those people growing. And if that's what it takes to, raise up a new faith base and, maybe double or triple the, Iowa YR's, status in that period, because, when, things start to constrict, people start to push back. And I think that is when you start to really see areas of growth. And so, to encourage people out there, listen, I would focus less on what you think can happen and just focus right now on, hey, it's all in God's hands. We trust the Lord with, the breath that we take in. I mean, we don't have to tell our hearts to beat. He does that for us. And so we shouldn't worry too much about what's going to happen in November. But that's not to say you shouldn't be involved. Yep. So how can people, as we close this out, what can people do to get more involved? How do they get in touch with you? How do they get involved in a meeting? Line them up.
Yeah. The best way to get involved is, again, go to our website, iowaYR.com. There's a join button that you can click, but also if you're not ready to join and you just want to learn more, there is an inquiry, sheet at the bottom where you can just say, hey, I'm interested, and tell me a little bit more. We are on social media, Instagram, not Twitter, X, and Facebook. So if you want to catch us there, you can. We get to be the focus of a lot of liberals' free time on our social media. So if you ever have downtime and want to read that, you can. But
isn't that funny? I know. Yeah. Sometimes when I post things, I get a lot of heat too, and I'm like, people are like, do you get upset when you see people writing this kind of stuff? I'm like, are you kidding?
No, you drove up my engagement. Thank you for that.
Right? It doesn't bug me at all. And I love that you have that attitude, because again, sometimes it takes a while to open somebody's eyes to something, and maybe it takes seeing some of these posts and some of the rhetoric that people will spew in the, call. So is it just the same? How do they find you on social media?
That's a great question. Let me find our tags.
I know it's at Young Iowa GOP. Is that Instagram?
Yep, that's X. And then our Instagram is just Iowa Young Republicans, and our Facebook, you just look up Iowa Young Republicans. So pretty easy to find. But yeah, we'd love to have everyone on board. I always say this, and I feel like it falls on deaf ears, but one of the most important things people can do is, if you're not a young Republican yourself, are your kids involved politically?
Yeah.
And we're very relaxed. We're very low key. You can be as involved as you want to be. You can come to one meeting a year, and if that's what you gives you your fill, then wonderful. But it's a really fun group. We're very relaxed. Again, we're doing campfires. I think in Eastern, our Vice Chair Jonathan is trying to put together like a canoeing trip
Nice.
Yeah. So it's like we're very relaxed. We just want to
it.
get together and share our like-minded ideals, have conversations, talk about the election, kind of. So it's very fun to be involved. So I always recommend get your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews referred over to us, or another state for that matter.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Everybody needs community.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of this is finding people that you can encourage, whether it's you going or, your kids, your grandkids, pushing them towards something that has a positive outcome instead of, just tearing them away into the philosophies of the world. I think that's always a good idea. Mary, I wish we had 2 more hours to talk. There's so much that I'd like to ask you, so we'll have to set it up to do it again. But I really want to thank you for coming out. I love hearing your heart for the Lord. I love what you're doing for getting young people engaged here in the state of Iowa, and I love how passionate you are about your faith and your politics. And so. Again, thank you. Really blessed to have you here. Listen, y'all, if you want to get involved, I would highly encourage you, again, go to their website, check them out on social media. Don't forget, as always, we believe that it is necessary that you walk out your faith, that you're engaged in politics. These things, they're not roads that head in opposite directions. They have a beautiful intersection, and it's often the intersection of truth, and it's so important that we find ourselves there. And so get engaged, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to Grassroots Iowa. I'm Pastor Jeremy, tuning out. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Iowa.